If you've ever experienced an increasing pain in your bowels when you get the urge to defecate, and the pain becomes an unbearable cramp that lasts a couple hours or so, you've experienced a form of irritable bowel syndrome. Now, there are a number of causes for this crippling symptom. Sometimes it's an autoimmune disorder in which the body is attacking itself. This can happen when there's a bacterial imbalance in the gut from taking antibiotics or oral painkillers. Other times it can happen because of a yeast or bacterial overgrowth like Candida or H. pylori. And in less common cases, the person has developed Crohn's disease. But what often goes underlooked, or rather overlooked, is a diet that includes vegetables, believe it or not. That's right, vegetables can be harmful to people like you and I. People who are sensitive to fiber, right? Because what happens when we get that terrible cramp is that our gut isn't able to break down the fiber from the vegetables. So the fiber basically gets stuck for a while and then produces a really aggressive bowel inflammatory response the next time we need to defecate. I was so relieved to discover that this was the reason I was experiencing this problem. That it was just the way that I was eating vegetables. Because this problem can get very complicated and it takes a lot of testing, and you have to experiment with probiotics and cleansing and things like that. So I'm glad it wasn't a bacterial imbalance after all. Now, the type of fiber that causes this particular irritable bowel syndrome is not just any kind of fiber, not all fibers. So we got to understand this. We want to be careful with how we consume insoluble fibers. This is the hard fiber that doesn't dissolve in water. Most vegetables, fruits, nuts, beans, peas, both chickpea and green pea, and lentils have this kind of fiber, either throughout or in the skin or husk especially. And a lot of these things, they have both, like chickpeas or like beans, for example. The skin has insoluble fiber, which isn't easy to digest, but the inside has a starch, which is easier, and it's soluble fiber, so it's actually much more helpful when you're digesting to make everything run smoothly. So how do we maintain a healthy diet and continue to eat these fibrous vegetables, which are healthy for us, without having horrible bowel cramps? The solution is to always eat insoluble fiber foods with soluble fiber foods. So you should be okay eating around a 1-to-1 ratio of insoluble versus soluble fiber foods. Basically, vegetables and starches or carbohydrates together. Mushy, soft foods with vegetables. And I wouldn't experiment much more than that. You have to be careful with this. Most people don't eat a lot of vegetables anyway. So if you're that kind of person, then mixing your veggies with your other foods is essentially what you need to do. Mostly carbohydrates. Because proteins don't have a lot of fiber, even soluble fiber. Now, there's a long list of foods that are predominantly made of soluble fiber. Most carbohydrates belong to this group: potatoes, yams, any kind of bread, pasta, even whole grain bread. Of course, the seeds and the grains have insoluble fiber, hard fiber. But with that much, wheat and flour, it's not a big deal usually. Rice, brown rice still has a lot of soluble. Wild rice is very hard, but it has the soluble fiber too. Corn-based chips or starches. Bananas and even carrots and beans are foods you can eat alone or combine with vegetables to prevent IBS symptoms. You just have to be careful with wild rice or beans, peas, and chickpeas, since they have a lot more skin and husks than the other soluble fiber foods. Personally, I find chickpeas are very fibrous, so eating them alone is not a great idea, but it's something I can get by with, but it can produce some irritation. And having said that, a lot of them still have a good amount of starch on the inside to counter the skin and husks. Like regular beans, I don't have a problem with because of how much starch is on the inside of the bean. So now you know that vegetables are a hidden, lesser known cause for severe abdominal pain. If you've already seen a doctor, naturopath, or GI specialist, but they're struggling to find out what is causing your IBS symptoms, they haven't mentioned this, vegetables and insoluble fiber, give this diet adjustment a try. All you have to do is mix your hard fibers with starches and carbohydrates, soft fibers, and just don't eat too much of the hard fibers unless you have enough mixed with the soft fibers. And don't eat the hard fibers alone, obviously. And I hope you become another relieved individual. Sabe sata suki hontu.